We interrupt this program to bring you some breaking news out of Gilead. Last month, Christian content creator Vanessa Chen, also known as VIVACIOUSHONEY, was persecuted for her faith after someone disagreed with her on the internet. The Eyes are reporting that the perpetrator is a non-believer who goes by the username The Antibot. Allegedly, the Antibot committed the unthinkable crime of pointing out how Vanessa's content pipelines people to the far right. Now, this is a developing story, and the Eyes have reason to believe the Antibot will strike again. We encourage everyone at home to be on the lookout for this dangerous individual. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor, and on this channel we talk about life and relationships after leaving the church and do some commentary on the goings-on in evangelical Christianity. Look, I have a green screen. I'm leveling up in the world. So last month, I made a video covering the popular fashion influencer Vanessa Chen of VIVACIOUSHONEY. I discussed how her content has changed following her recent conversion to Christianity. I mean, just a few years ago, Vanessa was posting about how to fashion prep for hot girl summer and style lingerie as clothing. Now, today, Vanessa is posting about her new Rosegun Bible-esque Christian podcast sponsored by Jesus and how to dress modestly while still being fashionable. I also pointed out how Vanessa's newer content might be pipelining her viewers to the far right. In one of her recent videos, she mentions going to see Cliff and Stuart Conneckley preach at Harvard. The Connecklys are street evangelists who work with far-right white supremacist figures like Charlie Kirk. Vanessa is also reportedly a fan of Rosegun Bible, a very conservative Christian podcast with direct ties to Donald Trump. She's also posting fashion tutorials that have, as she dubbed, a old money aesthetic, which one Reddit user pointed out could be interpreted as a conservative dog whistle. Apparently, Vanessa saw my video or was at least told about it because she dedicated an entire episode of her new podcast to vaguely addressing it. She never directly calls out my video, but she opens with snippets taken from later in her video where she mentions seeing rumors about her going down a pipeline.
She's going down this Christian content creator pipeline. My income plummeted. I felt the Lord say to me so clearly, do you want the world or do you want me?
Clearly, she's talking about my video. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the only YouTuber who has publicly criticized Vanessa or discussed how her content could be a pipeline to the far right. As we watch clips from her podcast, keep in mind that everything she says is most likely in response to my video. This context, I think, is really important. The first clip we'll watch is from about 7 minutes into her video.
You know, I've seen rumors about me online, swirling around the internet, people saying, oh, she's talking about Jesus because she's trying to capitalize off of it, because she's trying to make money, to milk her followers, and she's going down this Christian content creator pipeline in order to gain fame, in order to make a ton of money. That couldn't be farther from the truth.
If you watched my original video, then you'll know that I never said that Vanessa is only talking about Jesus to make money. I actually said that I couldn't speak to the legitimacy of her conversion, but that I also couldn't ignore the role that social media and marketing might play, given that other influencers have built successful online careers centered around their faith. In one of her previous podcast episodes, Vanessa claimed there isn't any material benefit in her talking about Jesus online. I responded to that by pointing out how people like Angela and Ari from Rosegun Bible and Ashley Hetherington have made very lucrative careers for themselves precisely by talking about Jesus online. I mean, Rosegun Bible runs 5 to 6 ad integrations on every single one of their podcast episodes and sells $120 tickets to their world tour. During this world tour, Angela and Ari, who bear in mind are 29 and 35, reportedly just sing worship songs and share their tear-filled testimonies to an audience of mostly teenage girls. From what I can tell, they're charging their young fans upwards of $100 for what's essentially a church service. I mean, when you've got influencers like Trisha Paytas putting on like full on concerts with backup dancers and like multiple costume changes at the same price point, I think what GGB is doing is a total ripoff. While I also can't speak to the legitimacy of Angela or Ari's faith, it's undeniable that it has proven to be a profitable marketing angle for them. Someone can have a genuine faith while also leveraging it to build a business. I also pointed out the irony in claiming there's no material benefit in talking about Jesus online while being an already successful content creator on a monetizable platform. I'm not sure if Vanessa has monetized her Christian podcast yet, but she does post clips of her podcast to her main YouTube channel, Instagram, and TikTok, which all have millions of followers. So she's already experiencing some financial gain from discussing Jesus online, even if it's less than what she makes from her fashion content. Again, I don't know whether she's a true believer, but I do know that claiming there's no possible way to make money off of faith is disingenuous. So, jumping back to the beginning of her video, Vanessa starts by discussing how the Christian life isn't always easy.
So I wanted to start this episode by talking about this idea, this misconception that the Christian life is easygoing, rainbows and butterflies, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, we are promised suffering on this side of eternity. So, Philippians 1:29 says, "For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake." I think it is so easy for us to say, oh, I want to be like Jesus, when we are thinking about all of the amazing, beautiful fruits of the Spirit, like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, etc. And yet, when we think about Jesus as being a suffering servant, that is a much harder pill for us to swallow when we're thinking about following in his footsteps. I mean, think about the apostles. Nearly every single one of them died a horrific, excruciating death while they were being persecuted as they were preaching the gospel. Or the entire book of Job is about this man who was righteous and followed the Lord and loved the Lord, and yet all of his life got taken from him. So again, it is such a false idea that the Christian life is easygoing by any means.
Again, this video of Vanessa's is most likely in response to my video. So Vanessa is saying here that someone critiquing her on the internet is somewhat akin to the suffering endured by Jesus and the apostles as described in the Bible. Girl, that's wild. You know, when Paul wrote those letters to the Philippians, Christianity was a relatively unstructured and minority religion. There were numerous Christian communities that all held different ideas of what it means to be a Christian. And the early church leaders, like Paul, were imprisoned multiple times by the Roman government, and most of them killed. So when Paul talks about Christians suffering, I'm pretty sure he had imprisonment, torture, and death in mind. I don't think he meant suffering because someone disagreed with you online, especially not in a country where Christianity is the dominant religion and Christian nationalists are increasingly taking over the government. Look, I get that it's not comfortable to see people critiquing your content or talking about you online. I've had Christian content creators call me a literal demon simply for wearing a septum ring and wearing a black craft shirt in a video. What they don't know is that the aesthetic of demon is like totally what I'm going for, so I take it as a compliment. I've had an entire subreddit filled with like hundreds of thousands of people criticizing me for weeks, and I'm not saying any of that is fun, but it's not persecution. Also, as a content creator, especially one with millions of followers like Vanessa, I think she has almost 3 million followers on, or 3 million subscribers on YouTube. This is just part of the territory. People will criticize you, and it's your responsibility to evaluate whether or not they may have a point. hand waving away criticism by invoking some supernatural battle between good and evil, it's not going to help you grow as a person. So, from here, Vanessa discusses how wearing a cross around your neck serves as a reminder of how Jesus suffered and died on the cross, and how Christians will also suffer as followers of Christ. She says that some Christian circles have sanitized the image of the cross and that it's actually an instrument of torture. She says wearing the cross is like wearing a guillotine around your neck. I actually really appreciate her for saying this because I also think that some Christians don't understand what the cross symbolizes, like Angela and Ari from Girls Gone Bible.
We're so big on symbolism, and we're so big on, like, we won't even wear like a t-shirt with a skull on it. Skulls, and a lot of people, there's a lot of debate about skulls because people think, well, skulls, it's just the human body. Skulls represent death. And Jesus represents life. And so we have life through Jesus. We don't need to be glorifying death. We don't need to be glorifying evil and darkness.
Right. Yeah, Angela won't wear skulls because they apparently symbolize death, but she has no problem wearing an instrument of torture literally around her neck. Make it make sense. Like, what did she think Jesus was doing on the cross? Like, just hanging out?
What are you doing? What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Also, Angela and Ari are clearly unaware of the various churches and chapels made entirely out of human bones in places like Portugal. The bones apparently serve to remind parishioners of the temporal nature of life and urge sinners to repent. The YouTuber Caitlin Dowdy of Ask a Mortician actually produced an excellent vlog about her travel to these chapels, which I'll link down in the description so you guys can check it out if you want to.
So yes, suffering and hardships are guarantees for when you're a follower of Christ. And if anything, when you become a Christian, life is going to get a lot harder in a lot of ways because now the world is going to hate you and it's going to persecute you.
Vanessa, you live in the United States. Here, Christianity is the dominant religion. The majority of our politicians are Christian. And right now, Christian nationalism is like sweeping the nation. You're unglued from reality if you think that the world is out to get you now that you're a Christian. If anything, your newfound faith affords you unmeasured privilege in this country. Again, someone criticizing you online is not a form of persecution. Let's discuss actual examples of persecution, shall we? So, in my home state of Texas, this year's legislative season saw an unprecedented number of anti-LGBTQ plus bills, of which 12 passed and will probably be signed into law by our governor, Greg Abbott. House Bill 229 defines gender according to an extremely and purposely reductive, strictly binary view of biological sex and requires government agencies to categorize citizens according to this definition. So, as far as the state is concerned, trans, non-binary, and intersex Texans wouldn't exist. The erasure of entire biological categories and gender identities by our government is persecution. House Bill 1106 makes changes to the Texas Families Code of child abuse that exclude parents who refuse to affirm a child's identity or sexual orientation. This bill potentially makes it legal for parents to use aggressive or violent tactics to reform their queer child. Legalizing parental abuse to erase queer children is persecution. Just last month, my husband, Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic, went to the Texas legislature to testify against Senate Bill 10. This bill requires that all Texas public schools place a framed poster of the 10 Commandments conspicuously, that's the wording, is conspicuously in every classroom. Spearheading this bill was a Republican lawmaker who appears to disregard the separation of church and state. She was actually directly asked if the separation of church and state exists in this country, and she said, "That's an interesting question." And she hopes that these posters will remind students that God is always watching. Vanessa, you're a Christian. What's the first commandment of the 10 Commandments? Oh, right. It's thou shalt have no other gods before me. Mandating that this commandment be placed in classrooms effectively communicates to non-Christian students that they're not allowed to be of another faith or no faith. Mandating that children become Christian in this roundabout way is persecution. SB 10 passed, by the way. States across the country are pushing through bills like this, and many of them are informed by a fundamentalist reading of the Bible. I really hate to say it, but America turning into Gilead isn't really that far-fetched. I'm actually rewatching all of The Handmaid's Tale right now, and honestly, some of it is sounding a little eerily familiar. Vanessa, well, yeah, Christian persecution does happen in other countries. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't, but it's not happening to you. It's laughable to suggest that you're experiencing persecution for your faith because I made a video about you when our government is actively stripping the rights of so many Americans. Also, girl, I never criticized you for being a Christian. I criticized how your content is influenced by the far right. Do you know that Christianity exists outside of conservatism? Like, you can be a Christian without engaging in purity culture and supporting people like the Knechtleys and Girls Gone Bible. Like, at an atheist conference recently, I said on stage that I've worked with more progressive Christians during my time on YouTube than I have with any other group or faith. I am fully in support of working with people, even with people that I might not agree with, when our goals are the same.
And so this kind of brings me into what I've been struggling with a lot lately. So before I was a Christian, I was a slave to my work. I was a slave to money. I was a slave to the follower count. I was a slave to how people perceived me online and in real life. I put my entire identity and self-worth into my career. And let me tell you, when I made the most amount of money, got the most amount of views, and had the most physically attractive body, I was the most depressed and unhappy. I was constantly chasing something that never fulfilled me. I always thought I needed more. You know, when I make this much money, when I get this many followers, that's when I'm going to be happy. And yet, all of it was so soul-sucking. The other day, I was looking through my old videos and I was so sad for the person that I saw. You know, my very first videos, I saw a girl that was just eager to create and just excited to step into this world of content creation. And then slowly over time, I saw myself morph into someone that I didn't even recognize, someone that was willing to sell herself for the sake of fame, for the sake of money, for the sake of attention from people. And it's really sad, and I felt so heartbroken for her. I saw this girl that put on a persona like a mask in order to appease the masses, and yet I knew inside she was so sad and she was so broken.
As a content creator myself, I understand the temptation to tie too much of your identity to your online persona. It's easy to overvalue things like views or follower count, especially in a world that's becoming increasingly virtual. Contrary to what evangelicalism teaches, part of becoming an emotionally mature person is recognizing that your identity and self-worth don't come from a single source. I think it comes from reflecting on your values, character, and interests. It stems from the relationships you cultivate and the energy you invest in them. And yeah, it can come from what you enjoy doing, like your job or hobbies, or from your belief system and spirituality. My channel is a reflection of who I am as a person, even if it's not the whole picture of who I am. As a neurodivergent person, a big part of my identity comes from my interests. For me, things like metal music and horror movies and an interest in all things macabre are integral to my identity. Sourcing your identity and value solely from one thing, like your social media career, is a dangerous game to play. But how is that different from what you're doing now, Vanessa? Instead of finding your identity solely from your online persona, now you're finding it solely from Christianity. The problem is you're looking for a cure-all. You're looking for one thing to tell you exactly who you are. And that's just not how things work. It's like you're saying, well, this one thing didn't help me find my identity, so I guess Christianity will give me the answer. I truly believe that happiness comes from balance and living a well-rounded life rather than placing all of your eggs in one basket. Something I cannot stand about evangelical Christianity is that it makes you hate the person you were before finding Christ. Vanessa talks about how sad she is looking back at the broken person she used to be. Vanessa, I'm sad to see how little grace you're giving your old self. Yeah, maybe old Vanessa had some things to work on. All of us do. But were you entirely broken? Obviously, Vanessa knows herself way better than anyone else. I won't pretend I can sit here as an outsider looking in and tell her exactly who she is. But I do know that the idea that people are like filthy rags without God is one of the most toxic elements of evangelicalism. The church particularly weaponizes this idea against young women, and it serves to break down an individual's unique identity and reshape it to conform to the church's will.
As soon as I started talking about Jesus on the internet, my income plummeted. And I'm not going to sit here and say that it hasn't been hard. It's been really hard because, again, I put all of my identity into my career, into my online persona. And yet it was through this that I felt the Lord say to me so clearly, do you want the world or do you want me? Do you want the fame? Do you want the money? Do you want all of these worldly successes? Or do you want to be a follower of Christ, a follower of someone who was a suffering servant? 2025 has been an extremely terrifying year so far. In a very short period of time, I went from making high five figures every single month to net negatives and seeing our savings just start to dwindle down and not knowing where our next paycheck is going to come from. Because all of a sudden, when I started preaching the gospel and talking about Jesus on the internet, brands no longer seemed to want to work with me. I was no longer marketable or brand friendly.
Okay. There's a lot to address here. Yeah, from what I can tell, it's true that her short form content about Christianity doesn't perform as well as her fashion content. She has lost some traction on social media over the last year or so, it seems like. But that's not the result of a supernatural battle between good and evil. I think a more reasonable explanation for her decrease in popularity is that her followers just aren't as interested in her religious content. I think it's really that simple. They probably subscribe to see fashion content and don't really care as much about Christianity. This is normal for content creators who make a sudden change in the type of content they're making. Like, most of you subscribe to me to watch content about religious deconstruction or anti-multi-level marketing. If I suddenly started talking about like trains or something, most of you probably wouldn't watch. I actually do think trains are really cool though. Maybe I should start a second channel about trains. I think another consideration is that Vanessa just has yet to find her target audience. Rosegun Bible has over 700,000 subscribers. Emmy Moore's podcast, Save Not Soft, has over 200,000 subscribers. There are people out there who, to my surprise, really love this type of Christian girly podcast stuff. Vanessa's Christian content is relatively new, and it takes time to grow an audience. It's extreme and maybe a bit privileged to immediately jump to the conclusion that there's some grand conspiracy against you because your brand new content hasn't like blown up yet. As for brands dropping her after she started talking about God, I find this hard to believe. Like, I talk about like really controversial topics on this channel, such as Satanism and the occult, and I still have tons of brands that work with me. Of course, I'm sure Vanessa would use this as proof of anti-Christian bias on social media and some secret satanic agenda or something. I'm not saying that she's lying, but as I mentioned before, Rosegun Bible, for example, places 5 to 6 ad integrations on their episodes. They're easily making tens of thousands of dollars every week from partnering with brands. They also don't exclusively work with Christian brands. They regularly do ad reads for mainstream companies like BetterHelp and NoCD. If fewer brands are interested in working with Vanessa, it probably has less to do with her identity as a Christian and more to do with her decreased popularity. It's the most reasonable explanation. She made a change in her content by talking about Christianity. Less of her followers are interested in that content, which leads to fewer views. Brands see that her social media is receiving less engagement, which leads them to partnering with her less often. Like, this isn't Christian persecution. This is just capitalism, baby.
In terms of, the followers and me idolizing how people viewed me, Christ tells us that when you follow him, people are going to hate you. They're going to come for you. Literally, my last podcast was about loving your enemies and praying for those who persecute you. And my goodness, I don't believe it was a coincidence that right around the time that I was filming that and posting that video, I was hit with the most amount of hate comments and just angry people, coming at me, and like a hate video and like all of these things that I was like, whoa, God is literally saying, okay, you talked the talk, now walk the walk.
Vanessa, I didn't come for you because you're a follower of Christ. I criticized you for talking about purity culture, supporting problematic people, and allowing your content to operate as a funnel to extremist ideology. It's interesting that you never address those critiques. Instead, you pretend that I'm just a hater who's out to get you because you're a Christian. Now, I can't speak to the comments she might be receiving. As a content creator myself, I'm well aware of just how cruel commenters can sometimes be. To my followers, please don't leave comments on our social media. It's really best to just not engage with her. Unfortunately, hateful comments are a reality for content creators. It's something that all of us deal with at some point in our social media careers. But it's not proof that there's some evil force looking to persecute Christians. Again, getting mean comments on social media isn't persecution. Having your rights taken away, which is something that's actually happening to people in this country at the hands of those who call themselves Christians, is persecution. Okay, from here, Vanessa talks at length about remaining faithful in your walk, even during tough times, and I don't have much commentary to add, so this is where we're going to end things. As I'm sure you guys are already thinking, this video of Vanessa's is a masterpiece in the Christian persecution complex, right? Instead of contending with any of my actual critiques, Vanessa claims I'm persecuting her for her faith. Why does she claim this? Well, claiming that there's an evil force trying to bring her down for no good reason allows her to hand wave away criticism without having to actually give it any thought. What's easier, saying it's because of the devil or doing the actual work of self-reflection? Now, I don't think Vanessa knows that this is what she's doing. If you've spent any time inside evangelicalism, then you'll know that they hammer into you this narrative of a supernatural battle between good and evil. As an evangelical, I think you live in a dichotomy. Everything that happens is either because of God or the devil. What Vanessa is experiencing right now is uncomfortable for her. Therefore, in her mind, it must come from the devil. Ultimately, this simplistic narrative serves to protect the church from criticism. It's what allows pastors like Mark Driscoll, I know I can't help myself but to mention Mark Driscoll, to brush aside allegations of abuse by claiming that demonic forces are out to get them. It's what allows Christian nationalists to strip the rights away from marginalized groups by claiming these groups are of the devil. Vanessa, if you're watching this, I'd encourage you to set aside this narrative for just a moment and take some time to reflect on how your new Christian content might be pipelining your viewers to the far right. Just take some time to think about it. That's all I'm asking. Thank you guys so much for watching, and if you haven't seen it yet, my channel just hit 100,000 subscribers, and I can't thank you guys enough for your support, and I am planning on doing some type of special video to celebrate. If you have ideas or opinions on what I could do to celebrate, please drop a comment. Also, a huge thank you to my patrons who help make these videos possible. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and ring the bell. If you'd like to follow me on social media, my Instagram is Taylor_the_antibot. And if you'd like to support this channel financially, a link to my Patreon is down in the description, and we'll see you on the next one. Say bye.